Saturday morning, all right. So I don't have a PowerPoint. I'll just be moving up and down, although they can't.
Yeah, I'd rather you not move.
Sing one day. It'll be a little awkward. You'll see me trying to move, but.
Or you can, just not.
Okay. Grab one of these. Pass it down. Don't mind, I'm going to leave this here so I know where I'm at. Okay, how are we doing? Are we still, I think there's a big stack coming through, yeah? So how many people here are current students at NC State? Okay, very good. Has anybody heard me give a conversation on academic integrity already, either in this session last year or in any other classroom session? Just a few? Okay. So I'll be leaning on the returners a little bit to give us some guidance. How many people here are returning to this role as a tutor? Okay, I'll definitely be looking for your help as well. So this is the academic integrity conversation. My name is Tony Shore. I'm Associate Director in the Office of Student Conduct here at NC State. For those of you who may not know, the Office of Student Conduct is part of a larger department on campus called the Department of Student Community Standards. So one of my tasks and responsibilities is to really help educate the community about what the policies are, what are the rules at NC State, what does it mean to be successful both inside of the classroom and outside the classroom. So in the grand scheme of things, we talk about violations of behavioral expectations. Now the goal is, if we do enough education, then we don't have to have those conversations about violations. So that's where you come into play. We're going to be focusing on academic integrity and hopefully avoiding something called academic misconduct. I'd like this to be a kind of an open conversation, and so if you're a returner and you've experienced something in the past and you want to raise your hand and say, you know, this happened and it felt a little awkward, or they asked me this question, I didn't really know what to do. I was working with a group of students and they wanted to work together. I wasn't sure how to handle that. This is now a great time to ask questions as it relates to NC State's Code of Student Conduct. So let's begin. What you have in front of you here is actually Section 8 of NC State's Code of Student Conduct. We will be coming back to this document a few times throughout the conversation, but what I want to do is use it as a primer on our discussion about academic integrity. You'll notice here there are 4 categories of behavioral expectations at NC State. We have cheating, we have plagiarism, we have aiding and abetting others to cheat and plagiarize, so helping others cheat or plagiarize. And then we have this thing called the destruction or removal of academic materials. In the 4 or 5 years that we have had that last category, I've only ever seen that once. So I'm not going to spend all my time on that. But really what that means is if I'm in a lab and I'm destroying someone else's work, that's academically dishonest because they don't have the opportunity now to be successful because of some targeted behavior on my part. It also could have to do with going into the library and removing materials that people might be using or might need to do their own research. So sometimes we think about highly competitive, academically minded folks here, and they want to have an edge over somebody else. So what do? They hide the resources from other people who might be competing against them. So that it's just a kind of a strange area of the code that we didn't have, and we realized that we needed it, so we added it because it happened. Now it hasn't happened since, so I'm grateful to say that. And that'll be the last that I mention in that category here. So defining academic integrity in a nutshell. Instead of making you memorize all of these things, and instead of making your athletes or athlete memorize everything about the code of student conduct, there are two fundamental tenets that we can boil all of these things into. Number one, when we're talking about academic honesty, the first default expectation is the work that you do is your own work. So I can't do work for you to turn in for a grade, and you can't do work for me to submit for a grade, unless we know that we have the instructor's permission. So how does this relate to you as tutors? Very simply, you can't do work for your student athlete for them to turn in for a grade. The relationship that exists between the student and the instructor is entirely built on trust, and that's at the core of academic integrity here at NC State. So the instructor, they trust that every student does their own work. And the instructor, when they assign a grade, they are giving that grade to the student for the work that he or she did. And that's the essential relationship behind academic integrity. So when they're turning something in for a grade, it's not work that you've done. It's not work that other people have done for them. It's an honest and ethical representation of their own capabilities. The other thing, tenet number 2, comes into that honest and ethical representation of self. So the work that we do cannot be misleading. I can't recycle papers, for example. So if I wrote something last semester, I can't simply put a new date on that, a new title, and put a new professor's name on that and turn it in as a grade, because it's not an honest and ethical representation of what I have been asked to do for this current assignment. So you may, in conversations with students, where they say, hey, I've written this paper before, easy, I can just turn this in, it's my own work, I've done so honestly and ethically, I cited everything properly, and so why shouldn't I just be able to turn this in for a new grade? The truth is, the bottom line, there's a rule against that at NC State. We can't recycle papers unless we have permission from the instructor. The practical response is no two assignments that your students will ever be given will be identical. And so we often find out about this because somebody turns in a really well-written paper, but only 50% of it relates to the work that they've been asked to do. So we have to pay attention to that. So those are the two areas of academic integrity that we want to pay the most attention to. Number one, the work is your own, unless we have permission to work as part of a group. And number two, the work is not misleading. It is always an honest and ethical representation of self. So when we think about, and I was outside for about 20 minutes here listening to some of this presentation, it is very clear, or it should have been made very clear in the last discussion. This is a professional relationship between a student and an employee of the university, you being the employee of the university. And so when we think about that through a lens of academic integrity, we're looking at how can I bring another layer of professionalism to this relationship? How can I help my students avoid these temptations of academic dishonesty? And so I'd like to shift us in that direction here. Before I go too much further, does anybody have any generic questions about the Code of Student Conduct or any of the policies? It's okay if you don't, I haven't really given you much time to look into that. If you ever have questions about those things, do not hesitate to ask. You can always ask someone in this office. You can always pick up the phone and call me. Ask for me by name. I would be more than happy to speak with you. You can find our information on the Student Conduct website, which I'm not sure is on there, but it's studentconduct.dsa.ncsu.edu. Studentconduct.dsa.ncsu.
I have a question. I don't know if it's a good question for you or for our advisors.
Sure.
Let's say we're tutoring 2 students and they have the same class with different sessions, and one of them has already taken the test.
Yep.
Is it okay for them to discuss?
I would say no. It's a great question. So the question, if you didn't hear, what if I'm working with 2 students who are in the same class but different sections, and one has already taken the test? Can they discuss the test? If we think conceptually about academic integrity, we're talking about leveling the playing field for all students. So academic integrity means everybody who moves forward academically at NC State has the same opportunity to be successful. And so if I have 2 students and one of them has taken the class earlier, and they start, maybe they're not, I'm not telling you the answers, or I'm not telling you what questions are on the test, but maybe I just say something like, you only need to focus on chapters 2 and 3 because our professor skipped number 1, so spend your time studying those 2 things. What I've done there is I've created an uneven playing field. So the person who gives assistance to that one individual has now created an academic advantage that doesn't exist in the same way for everybody else in that class. So that's a great, great question. Are there other questions similar to that? Okay. Let's talk a little bit about what I would think is one of the most important conversations when we look at academic integrity. Why do students cheat? So one of the other things I heard from the previous discussion was it happens. Cheating absolutely happens. Sometimes it's from individuals who are in a position of power. So I'm a tutor or I'm an authority figure, and I'm going to give you this test, or I'm going to give you the answers, or I'm going to write this for you. And we heard about how inappropriate that is. But sometimes it's just an individual that decides, I'm going to take it upon myself to act in this way and to do something that maybe I realize, maybe I don't realize is academically dishonest. So let me turn this to the audience here. Let me ask this. For those of you who are students and those of you who are former students, has anybody, have you ever witnessed something in a classroom that you thought, that's probably dishonest? That's probably cheating. So think about that student. Why do you think that individual or those individuals took that risk? Why is it that students cheat is really the question.
In labs, sometimes people know someone in a lab before them, and so they get the answers from the lab beforehand, so they don't have to be in lab
Yeah.
to complete the actual assignment. So everyone else is in lab for 2 hours, but they're only in lab for 30 minutes because they don't have all the answers already.
So what do you think the motivation is for them to take that type of shortcut?
Well, they can get all the answers in a shorter amount of time, and everyone else, they don't have to spend the time actually doing it.
Yeah, so maybe I don't want to spend that kind of time. Maybe I just don't have that kind of time. Very good. Other thoughts? Why do students cheat? Not just athletes, but students.
The grade at the end of the course is more important to actually learning what it is that they're.
Exactly.
So basically just there to check off the class.
Yeah, so you said about 3 things there. So maybe I don't care as much about this class. This isn't one of my core courses. It's just something I need to check off, and so I'm going to make sure I get a good grade so I can keep progressing academically. Maybe I do care about that class, but I've prioritized the grade over everything else, over even my own integrity. I think you said one more, but I can't remember what it is. Those are good.
So like in plagiarizing, sometimes it would be that they waited procrastinated
Yes.
maybe
Yeah.
until the last minute and have to grind down to do it properly.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so you need to just copy this little section right here.
Yeah, and we can even make a hybrid of these 2 things. So imagine if I'm a procrastinator and I don't care about this course in particular. And so now, not only have I waited until the last minute, but I don't really even care enough to put any effort into this class. And so it's just easier for me to get online, to look something up, and to use that material as my own. Or to look to other people who have done that work and grab that information and use it as my own. Yeah.
Desperate because they don't understand it.
Yeah.
So rather than being stupid, they just copy it.
Yeah, so I don't understand it. I don't have confidence in this subject matter. And so maybe I also lack some level of confidence in walking up to my professor or raising my hand in class or going and visiting them during their office hours. we were gonna get to this a little bit later, but we're now in a good part of this discussion. So when I think of a student athlete, I think about, well, this may not fair. Let me say this. Students who get to perform at NC State as a collegiate athlete, think about the confidence that they have in that area, the skill set that they brought with them in that particular sport. The pool, the field, the court, wherever you might be, you just exude confidence. I know what I'm doing. I know that I'm good at what I'm doing. Don't confuse that level of confidence with confidence in the classroom. So you might see somebody who is the most confident person you've ever seen. They walk into the room, they just kind of light up the place, and they can work the room and work the crowd, and they're friends with everybody and shaking hands, and a lot of friends and a lot of acquaintances. But when it comes to writing, maybe I shut down a little bit because I don't feel as confident in that area as maybe I do in other parts of my life. So one of your jobs as a tutor of athletes or an athlete is to help bring that level of confidence to the subject matter that you're learning. Great point. Other thoughts?
Sometimes it's just really easy or convenient. Like
Yeah.
sometimes a teacher will make a mistake and they'll like leave the answer and they're just like, wow, how would be silly? We're not this.
Yeah, so this one's interesting for me because I used to just gloss over it, where students would come to me and say, I just thought I could get away with it. I knew what I was doing, and I just moved forward because I thought it was worth the risk. I mean, no one else was looking, and I thought everybody else was doing this. And I thought, okay, how many times has that actually happened? In the last several years, and to be clear, I'm not talking in the student-athlete realm, but the students who come into the Office of Student Conduct because of some level of academic dishonesty, and I say, help me understand two things. What happened and why did this happen? The number of students who say it happened because I thought it was worth the risk blows my mind. So there are students out there who know full well what's going on, and yet they choose to do it anyway. So one of the other things that you will be doing as tutors is to help put them in a position where they understand that should never be a decision. That should never be a choice that I get to make. The idea of cheating on this test or exam should not even cross my mind. And if it does, that I'm so freaked out by the possible consequences that I'm just not even gonna give that any credence. Great example.
I have a question. So like if we saved our old like test or quizzes from the previous semester, would that technically be an unfair advantage because everyone might not have friends who have old
Right,
tests?
right.
or quizzes?
It could be and it might not be. So if I was a tutor and I was employed in this role, I would never give previous material to somebody that I'm working with. However, if a student athlete comes up to me and says, do you know if we're allowed to study from old exams? The answer is, I don't know. It depends on the professor. Every professor has a different set of expectations for that. And so you might say, go to your instructor and ask if they have old exams that you might be able to collect. You just never know which professors fall into that category, and I would put that ownership on the student athlete to say, no, go have that conversation. That's a really great question, and sometimes that'll be a really great resource for you. So go have that conversation with the professor.
You know what Coopers is?
It is the online repository of
Basically, yeah.
things that
They
maybe
kind of
shouldn't
similar to what
exist
she was saying.
Yeah.
Like pointing someone in the direction of like the Coopers is like, because online it is accessible to everybody. Because remember she was saying in the last, if it's not accessible to everybody, it's like okay.
Yeah.
But Coopers is accessible.
So then the question, so that's less of a question about student athletes and total accessibility. That's more of a question at the university level. Are these things supposed to exist online? So I might be able to get online and download any album or watch any movie that I want, but if I didn't pay for it, I'm probably not supposed to be looking at that or listening to that, because I haven't given that payment to the creator of that material. Here's something kind of a little bit tangential here. Every bit of material that a professor makes for his or her course is copyrighted by that professor. They own the copyright protections to that information. And so they may not have given whoever posted that on Proofers permission to put that up there. And we get calls all the time from faculty who are really, really upset to say, Tony, I know this stuff is out there, I don't want it to be out there. Do you know how long it takes to put these homework assignments together and create these exams? And to do so in a challenging way, but in a way that still gives them a chance to be evaluated properly. I don't know if I'm grading the student based on the work that they've done or the things that they've looked up online, and so I'm at a loss. What am I supposed to do? And you can hear the panic in their voice. This is 5 years of test creation, and now I have to throw it all away. I'm done. It's okay. It's okay. So what we do then is we get General Counsel's office on the phone and say, can we reach out to people who host this website and get them to take it down because they don't have permission to publicly post that copyrighted material? Another great question. So, I'm running a little bit behind here. Let me switch gears a little bit. Think about all those concepts that we just discussed. All of those stressors that might exist in a student's life. For you as a student or you as a former student, think about the times when you were the most stressed in college. Competing deadlines, I didn't have enough time, I didn't give myself enough time, I'm a procrastinator, I don't have confidence in this area. One of your jobs is to help your student athlete or athletes anticipate those times when those stresses are going to be at the highest. And so one of the ways that we do that is by doing this kind of pre-tutoring orientation with your student or with your students. So from day one, you are, like we heard before, you are establishing the professionalism in that relationship. So you show up to your first tutoring session and you maybe send them an email ahead of time and say, I want you to come prepared with every course syllabus that you have.